Welcome back to Business Mathematics 2 MA1203. So for this session, we are going to talk about the inverse of a matrix. So before we are go deeper into the inverse of matrix, I want to look at discuss about this. Okay. So if I have if I have 2 times something equals 2, you know that this is 1. Okay, so if you have a times something should be a, this is should be 1. Okay, and for matrix, what is 1 2 3 4 times what matrix equals 1 2 3 4? You know that this matrix should be the identity matrix. Okay, so the identity matrix is the generalization of 1 in the real number. 1 in the real number. Okay, so what about inverse of a matrix? Let's look at this. The inverse of a number, so if you have 2 times 1, so the inverse is what we usually say 1 over 2. So the inverse of 2, the inverse multiplication of 2 is I want to find square such that 2 times square equals 1. What about the inverse of a half? What about the inverse multiplication of a half? So I want to find something that multiply with a half will become 1. So it should be 2. So the inverse multiplication of a half in real number is 1. The same, if we are going to talk about the inverse, what is the inverse of this? What is the inverse of this? So I'm looking a matrix, when it multiply with when you multiply this, you will have 1. So this is what we usually call the inverse of a matrix. Inverse multiplication of the matrix this. Okay, let's try this one. Let's try this one. Select. The question is this. Can you determine whether this is this inverse of this? Is this the inverse of this? Inverse we usually use the to the power of -1. Is this the inverse of this? Yeah, you can just multiply. Let's see. If this is the inverse of this, if you multiply, it will become the identity. Is it a half? Don't forget to multiply this. A half plus a half, 1. A half minus a half, 0. And you can try the other one, 0 and 1. It settles. So you have, when you multiply this with this, you have identity matrix. It means this is the inverse of 1, 1, 1 minus 1. Okay, that is what we usually meant the inverse of a matrix. It means we want to find matrix such that if this is multiplied by that matrix, will become identity matrix. Okay, yeah? Okay, so that's what you usually meant by identity matrix. Let's continue then. So I want to find the solution of this. And then we look at the augmented matrix is this. And after doing elementary row operation, you end up with the reduced row echelon form. This is 1 0 0 1 1 1. So I'm talking about the system of linear equation that have one solution, that only have one solution. Okay, yeah. So you have this. So how do you this? So when we can see something extraordinary here, because we consider the submatrix this, and we end up with 1 0 0 1. So when you are doing the elementary row operation and you change this into reduced row echelon form, it's like you have this one, calculating, you multiply by some matrix, and it will become identity. What is the matrix? Is, if this is A, that is the A inverse. Okay, yeah, A inverse. So when you are doing elementary row operation, you bring this into this. It means you multiply this with something that become identity matrix. So the multiplication is the same as doing elementary row operation. So if you have this 1 0 0 1 identity matrix, you use the elementary row operation, it will end up with A inverse. A inverse. Why? Because if you have I, don't forget identity. If you have identity times any matrix, it will become A. So if you have identity times A inverse, it will become A inverse. Okay, yeah? So let's try doing that. Okay, yeah? Okay, let's try doing that. So I have 1, 1, 1 minus 1. Okay, yeah, this is the, okay. So I want to change this into 1 0 0 1. Okay, yeah. And when I use 1 0 0 1, if I use the elementary row operation, it will change into the A inverse. A inverse. Let's try this one. Okay, yeah, you use this elementary row operation. You can do this, and then this will become identity. Don't forget this. After you do elementary row operation, you become identity. It means from this, you multiply by this. That is the same as multiply by A inverse. And identity multiplied by this is multiplying with A inverse. So if you have this, using the same elementary row operation, you end up with the inverse. Okay, yeah? Very good method indeed. But you have to be careful when you are doing the elementary row operation. Okay, yeah? And then so the A inverse is this. Okay, yeah? And you have to master all of, when you are finding the inverse of metric, try looking at this one, and then the cofactor method, yeah. Cofactor method is used in high school. Try to review the cofactor method, finding the inverse using the cofactor method. Okay, the next one we will discuss about the application. Okay, see you on the next session.